Lysa TerKeurst is a New York Times bestselling author of The Best Yes, Unglued, and Made to Crave. And she's the president of the very successful Proverbs 31 Ministries and the author of this new book, Uninvited, Living Loved When You Feel Less Than, Left Out, and Lonely. In her new book, she is vulnerable and candid about her own personal experiences of rejection and encourages the reader that even in the midst of loneliness, rejection, pain, our importance doesn't lie in another's person's opinion of us, but in living a life based on who God says we are. Welcome, Lysa.
Thank you.
It's a miracle that you're here. You had a slight health scare recently.
Yes, I did.
Tell us about this.
Well, typically I'm a very healthy person. I love to exercise and eat well, and so I hardly even go to the doctor for a cold or anything. So this was very stunning and shocking to me. But my husband and I had been out of town and returned home on a Sunday evening. And then I woke up on Monday morning at 5 a.m., sat up in bed and was just in excruciating pain and stepped out of bed, collapsed onto my floor. And told my husband, I think I'm dying. You have to take me to the hospital right away. So he rushed me to the hospital and I was there. They were running tests for about 5 days before the surgeon came in my room and said, we finally figured out what's wrong with you. And basically what happened, and it's kind of a medical fluke, like if someone has an aneurysm, it's just like they can be perfectly healthy one day and then really in dire straits the next day. But mine was the right side of my colon detached from my abdominal wall, flipped over, wrapped around the left side, and started filling up with fluid and gas and blood, and just it distended to the size of about this big.
And you had no idea this was like.
I knew something terrible was happening to me, and I knew, I mean, I would close my eyes and pray, like, Jesus, please let me see the light, because I was in so much pain. But then the surgeon said, okay, we finally figured out what's happened to you, and you need to be taken into surgery. We're going to have to remove about half of your colon. And I said, well, if we're going to be doing all that, that sounds really major. I need to go to like a big hospital somewhere else. And he said, well, that would be great if you had the time, but if we don't take you into surgery, your condition is extremely life-threatening because your colon can rupture if it distends too big. So they rushed me into surgery, cut me open, and the surgeon was able to save my life, and I'm thankful. And, you know, other than having a smaller intestine than most people, I'm fine. I can eat what I want to, and I'm 3 weeks post-surgery now, and just very happy, very thankful to be here.
We are very excited that you're here. I want to say, first of all, thank you for writing this book. We're going to chat for a bit about Uninvited. What motivated you to talk about this? Because I think this is an issue that many women, many men face. They feel uninvited, they maybe feel rejected in their lives. Why deal with this issue? Right.
Well, I write about what I struggle with. So if you want to know what my issues are, you can look at my books, and those are all my issues. But I really think when I go to work on a message, I always think first and foremost, is this a topic that I need desperately? And if I'm going to spend over a year researching and working and writing, I really want it to be something that the Lord addresses within me. And I just knew I was struggling with rejections of my past, still very much affecting me in the present. And I tell you, one of the biggest reasons I wrote this book right now is because I think in our highly filtered, social media saturated world, we're very, very aware of the great stuff that everybody else is doing. And everybody else's marriage looks more romantic. Everybody else's kids look better dressed and more successful. Everybody else's home is more beautifully decorated, right? And their life just seems more exciting. And so we can quickly hop on social media and do the comparison thing. But even more damaging than that is if your two best friends got together and went out to dinner last night, you're gonna see it on social media today. And very quickly you can go from being this like strong, happy, capable girl to just sinking on the inside, feeling uninvited. And so I just wanted to tackle it.
You start off the book talking about your relationship with your dad, and a very tumultuous relationship where you always wondered if he was going to leave until finally he did. And that was the first kind of experience of rejection. And you said, all of a sudden you saw yourself as Lysa, the unwanted one. Tell us about that and how that kind of led to other events as well.
Well, I think anytime we experience rejection, especially when it's rejection in our childhood, and little people don't have a way to process big people issues. So my dad had issues that I just couldn't understand. All I knew is that he abandoned me and abandoned our family. So it really tapped into two core fears that feed our propensity for rejection. When my dad left, I felt abandoned. That's the first core fear that will feed how much you feel rejected or hurt or lonely. And the second, besides being abandoned, is losing one's identity. And so those are two core fears that really feed how much we'll feel those feelings of rejection later on in life. And his absence and then him just never coming back home really, in my heart, kind of dug this thought pattern. You're not wanted and you're not accepted. And I carried those thought patterns into every adult relationship that I had. And I've even carried them into my marriage. And I'll have to say, it's probably one of the hardest things not to revert back to that old pattern of thinking. Even if my husband, all he has to do is look at me funny, like he'll come home from work and just have a look that he didn't mean anything by it. But all of a sudden I'll hear that old script, you're not wanted, you're not acceptable. And it comes all the way back from that time my dad left and never came home.
Did you always know that that was kind of the root of rejection? Because I think of many people who, we struggle with that, but we don't know where the root is, where it starts. And so we look for acceptance in so many other ways, but knowing the root can be the key to changing our lives.
It really can. And I think I put in the book, rejection steals the best of who I am by reminding me the worst that's been said to me. So it doesn't have to be some big epic moment like your dad leaving, although certainly for those of us who have that father wound, that is often a big part of the root of rejection. But it could also be something very, very, like on an average, ordinary day in middle school, something very quick that one classmate said to you. And somehow that one thought just wove its way deep down in your heart and settled into such a permanent place that rejection back in middle school can often still affect us today. I mean, I remember in middle school one time, this guy told me that I had big legs. And to this day, I will not wear a dress. Unless I absolutely have to, I will not wear a dress. And, I think it's something like that it was just a statement that was made in our past, but somehow that lie becomes a line that we start to repeat to ourselves. And that line then becomes a liability in every other interaction that we have. And that liability is something that affects us in our thinking process, but also in our perception of our relationship with other people.
You talk about, you had alluded to it, different relationships that you had where, again, looking for just that acceptance. And that led to having a relationship with a boyfriend that led to an abortion.
That's right.
Tell us about that.
Well, I think a lot of times when we're so desperate to keep something from walking away, we can often make compromises that we wouldn't make otherwise. And I was desperate to hang on to that relationship. And so it led me to make just little compromises that over time compounded into eventually me getting a positive pregnancy test and being completely freaked out by that. And I panicked and I went to an abortion clinic and asked them to help me. And they gave me a test and said, well, you really shouldn't consider yourself pregnant, even though the test is positive. It's just cells dividing, and we can take care of this problem quick and easy. And I bought that lie and had an abortion. And I think that one event is probably the thing that brought me to my knees more than anything else. Everything else in my life up to that point were things that other people had done to me that broke my heart. But this was a decision that I made on my own. And it was devastating. But the Lord was good even in that, because a devastated heart often becomes the most desperate heart. And for the first time in my life, I became completely desperate for a God that I wasn't even sure up until that point really existed. And so I'm thankful.
And that's kind of the rallying cry in this, is that, through rejection of people, remembering our worth in God, remembering that we have to see our identity in who God says we are, not what other people might say we're not.
That's right. And I've heard identity talked about in so many Christian circles, and I've heard it preached from the pulpit, and we've studied it in Bible studies, but there's something different that I discovered as I was writing this book and doing the research. The reality of I'm a child of God, holy and dearly loved, that is the core and the essence of my identity. But I need an intimacy-based identity. I need to take that and make it personal. And in order to do that, I wrote in the book, we need to wrestle well with 3 statements. God is good to me, and God is good at being God. And I'm telling you, I have wrestled with those questions because a lot of times I want to take my circumstances and how other people are accepting me and treating me, and that determines whether or not my life is good. But I think if I can make it intimate to me, if I can make God's love for me, I didn't earn this love, and God's love isn't based on me. It's simply placed on me, and it's the place from which I really have to live, and that is loved. Like I'm already loved by this really good God who sometimes does allow circumstances that aren't good, but that doesn't change who he is or who I am. So God is good to me, and God is good at being God.
You talk about starting every day with God is good to me, God is good at being God, and today is yet another page in our great love story.
Yes.
That's the important part, is that intimacy with God. You have a funny story that I have to talk about in the book. The lady at the
gym who hates me. I know.
Because you know what? I love this. You say, I assign thoughts to others that they never actually think.
That's right.
We do that so often.
Yeah, so I also tackle this topic of perceived rejection. Now, a lot of what we've been talking about already is real rejection, like in your face, I'm rejecting you, or you're rejecting me, my dad rejected me, all of that, real rejection. But then there's this other thing called perceived rejection. So I was at the gym one day, and there was this woman working out on the elliptical beside me, and seriously, she's gorgeous. She has no fat on her body, not even at her belly button, which I didn't even know was possible. And I get on the elliptical, and I think to myself, the only thing tight on me is my ponytail right now. Like, I felt like a marshmallow beside this amazing model.
I think all of us have felt that way at the gym.
And so I just decided, I don't know, I just had one of those competitive moments where I thought, for the sake of every other fluffy feeling girl, I'm not going to let this lady out elliptical me.
Good for you.
And so I set my pace at hers, and like if her foot moved like this, my foot moved like this. And it was a little awkward because we were right beside each other, but I stayed in sync with her.
Yeah.
And then suddenly my phone rang, and it was a friend who I knew really needed just a quick little bit of information. You're not supposed to be on the phone in the gym, and I'm typically a rule follower, but I was like, I can answer it real quick. So I answered it real quick, but I was going so fast on the elliptical, I couldn't talk softly because I thought a lung was about to pop out of my chest, honestly. And so I talked to my friend. Well, right as I hung up the phone for my friend, the lady beside me got off the elliptical, kind of breathed real heavy and huffed over to the treadmill. And it was in that moment I decided she hates me. She hates me forever. So I would see her at the gym. I would avoid her. I would perceive all these looks that she was giving me. And then one day, she was walking out of the bathroom when I was walking in the bathroom at the gym, and she smiled at me. And it wasn't.
She doesn't hate me.
I know, and it wasn't like I'm about to whip your tail on the gym floor.
Yeah.
It wasn't that kind of smile. It was like true, like, hey, go girl, you know? And I walked into the bathroom, and I just remember standing there thinking, I don't think any of those crazy thoughts I've been assigning to her this whole time that she must be having about me, I don't think they really exist. I think it was all perceived in my head. It was some insecurity inside of me that wrote a script, and I assigned that script to her, and now I've been walking around thinking this poor lady hates me, when in reality, she probably hadn't even been thinking about me, right? But I do this not just with the lady at the gym, I'll do this with loved ones too. I'll catch a little phrase that somebody says, and it could be a dear friend, and I'll suddenly write a script. Well, you know, she said that because of this, and that because of this. And suddenly I create some drama in my head that really never even needed to be there. So I really tackle also in this book, Uninvited, that whole deal of perceived rejection, assigning thoughts and phrases to other people that they never thought or said.
Oh, this is so good. And our time is up, Lysa.
We could just keep going,
We
girl.
just started. Thank you again. I'm going to keep saying this. Thank you so much for writing this book. It's called Uninvited, Living Loved When You Feel Less Than, Left Out, and Lonely. You are going to want to get your copy, plus a highlighter, so that you can highlight every single page like I have. You can pre-order at our eStore as well to get your copy.